Okay, and we are back with some more stuff on this thing. Okay, so we've got our first boss extrude made. It is fully tied down. We've got our sketch is maybe fully constrained. So let's go ahead and keep going. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to start a sketch on, not the front face. It's actually the front face of this. So not the front plane, it's going to be this face right here. Okay, so let's go ahead and click on that surface, start a new sketch. And this sketch is going to end up being, they should list this on the first one, but on the second one, it's going to end up being a revolve cut. So whether doing a revolve cut or a revolve boss base, the very first thing that I encourage you always to do is put in a center line. That's because the revolves automatically go off of the center line to be able to revolve, as well as that gives you the ability to put in diameters instead of radiuses. And remember, when we're working with components like this, cylindrical components, this one could go either way because this is technically half of a cylinder, so you could measure the radius on it. But when you're working with cylindrical components, you're always going to be using diameters. Okay, so let's go ahead and put in our center line. So I'm going to click, I'm going to hover over here, just making sure that I see that blue line there to tell me that I'm in line with the origin, because this is going to be in line with the origin. Okay, so I've got that in line with the origin. You can see I can't drag it around. Center lines are the only lines that are acceptable for me to be unconstrained on the ends, where it doesn't really matter. Center lines, because they're not model geometry, as long as the main line itself is black, everything else is just reference. Okay? Alright, so next up we're going to go ahead and sketch the shape that we see on the bottom of page 21-7. So I'm going to grab my line tool. First part I'm going to click on is, I'm going to go ahead and click over here. Now, because our model behind this is fully constrained and tied down to the origin, we don't have to worry quite as much about tying down these sketches to the origin as much as we do have to tie them down to the model behind it, this part that we've already got in there. So I'm going to hover over my center point on this line, which just so also happens to be coincident with the center line. I'm going to click, I'm going to go straight up, and we're going to kind of make a counterboard shape down in here. I'm going to make that shape, come back over, click on this edge, come back down, click on the midpoint of that edge, and then, here's the important part, close it up. Because if you don't close it up, SolidWorks isn't going to know that you want to make a part out of that. So now we've got 3 different dimensions that we need. We need a diameter on this one. I think they're using diameter. Yep. We've got a diameter on this one and a length on this one. So let's go ahead and grab our dimension tool. First up, let's go ahead and handle the diameters. Remember, to do a diameter, we're going to do the double din trick. So we're going to click on a line or a point, then we're going to click on the center line. Remember, if you go above the center line, that's the single distance. That's going to be the radius in this case. If you go below the line, there we've got that double dim, or the diameter in this case. So go ahead and click there. We've got 5.41. We actually need that at 4.5 inches. Here we go. We got that one in. Now I'm going to go ahead and click on this last one. Why, you might ask, instead of clicking on the length up here? It's because once you enter one diameter, SolidWorks is going to continue you in that diameter tool unless you hit escape or make a selection that doesn't really make sense. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that off to this side. That dimension is going to be 2.5 inches. And lastly, I need the distance from here to here, or basically this line length here. So I'm going to click on that line length. It's going to take me into the diameter tool. However, if I hit escape once, it exits that and goes back to just our normal standard selection. So I'm going to click that up there. That one is going to be 5 inches. And now you can see that we've got our entire sketch fully defined here. So let's go ahead and exit that sketch. Rotate slightly down into an isometric style view. I always go isometric style view when I'm getting ready to do a feature. Just gives me a little bit more view of the world, let's say. Gives me a better idea of what my feature is doing to the things around it. This is especially important if you're doing like holes and stuff, because you can see if the holes are impacting something that you didn't anticipate them impacting. Or in this case, making sure that it's actually going through the part itself. So we're on page 21-8 now. Let's go ahead and do our revolve cut. I'm going to hit my S key to get to my quick tools. I'm going to hit the drop down next to my extrude cut, because remember, this is just going to give me that linear extrude cut. Hit next to it, and that's going to give me all of my options for cuts. We're going to go to Revolve Cut, and because I had a single center line in there, it automatically selected that to do my Revolve Cut. We're going to go ahead and leave it at 360 and hit OK, or our green check mark. Alright, so there's our step 2. We've got that bore through there with our counter bore up here. Next up, we need a couple of cutouts on this face up here. So let's go ahead and click on that face and start a new sketch on that face now. Hit our new sketch button. So these cutouts are going to be squared cutouts that are collinear with each one of these little flat edges. So what we can do is we can actually use the 3-point corner triangle. Okay, so what this triangle does is this gives you the ability to select 2 points on a corner, or 3 points on the corner. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this, get into that tool. I'm going to click on this point here, because these, the way that this particular rectangle works is it's coincident here, and then it comes down here a certain amount. So if we use like one of our standard like 2-point square rectangles, the 2-point rectangles always work in directly horizontal and vertical orientations. This one is not one of those. So with the 3-point, I can click here. You can see that it's just giving me a construction line. Then I can click here. That's my second coincident. And then I pull down. And there we go. There's our second one. Now, SolidWorks wants you to convert that edge there. I disagree. I think that this is the best tool. This is way easier because we already have this as coincident. We already have this as perpendicular. We already have these as parallel. Rather than having to put all of these in later on, this tool, this 3-point rectangle tool, automatically puts those relationships in. And any time that you can do that, it just makes that a little bit easier. Now, you've got 2 different options on what to do at this point. You can either mirror it and have this mirrored down here, or what I'm going to do, I'm just going to put in a second one. So click there, pull in here. That's going to give me a second one. I'm going to hit escape a couple of times to get out of the tool, and then I'm going to click on this edge and hold control and click on this edge, and now I'm just going to do an equal relationship. So now I have 2 equal ones that are both related to those flat spots. So if I were to go back to that very first shape that we made and modify these flat spots and make it, say, 1.5 inches from here to here rather than 1.7, this entire shape will follow it on both of them. Okay, so that's why I did it this way. So next we need 1 dimension. So I'm going to hit my S key, dimension key. I'm going to select this face here. And now you can see as I pull out from that, it's going to give me different options. So I can do vertical dimension, horizontal dimension. I don't want either one of those. I want just that linear dimension from here to here. And that's going to be 0.75. And you can see that it changed both of them. So now we've got those both at 0.75 with that singular dimension right here. It does say 2 times 0.75 in the book, which indicates that we've got 0.75 in 2 different locations. Okay? All right. So with that done, let's go ahead and exit our sketch. Go back to a slightly isometric view. This time I'm not going to go, I'm not going to look at the opposite side face over here. I'm going to look at this face because we're going to be doing an extrude boss base of these. So I'm going to hit my S key. I'm going to go to my extrude boss base button, and we are not going 16 inches. In this case, we are only going 1 inch. Okay. So there, let's go ahead and hit our green check mark. And now we've got our little 1-inch tabs on the end of our part. Okay. So next up, we've got some interesting little cutouts on the bottom. So these cutouts are 2 rectangular cutouts that are going to be cutting down and through our component here. So a lot of the times I see people looking at a situation like that and trying to do... Sorry, I'm just verifying something. And trying to, like, figure out how to put a plane down here or how to sketch on, like, a surface down here because of course they're coming in from this end. You don't have to do that. What we're going to do instead is we're going to come up here to, if I can get a good view here. Okay, we're going to come up here to our planes. If I hover over my top plane, you can see my top plane is bisecting it, right? It's right in the middle where the origin is. But if I sketch something on that top plane that doesn't impact this edge right here, then I can extrude that down and through my part, and therefore have those same cuts on an existing plane. Because remember, we want to minimize the number of features. We want to minimize the number of sketch. We want to minimize the number of complexity in sketches. It's just this big juggling game of making sure that these things don't become too complex. And the more reference geometries you make, which would be an alternate plane that was created that was like tangent or collinear with this edge here, planes, axes, all that stuff, the fewer of those that you can create, the less confusing your model will be in the future. Because we're making these with the full intent of not having to modify them ourselves, but somebody's going to have to. Okay? So let's go ahead and click on our top plane. We're going to hit the sketch button. And now we're going to create a couple of rectangles. So in this case, we can go ahead and go back to using our corner rectangle or our 2-point rectangle tool, because these rectangles are purely in the horizontal and vertical orientation. Let's go ahead and hit that. Now our first one, our first click on both of these is going to be right on this edge here. We want to make sure that we're on this edge so that when we click it, it's dropped and that relationship is in there. I'm just going to draw 1 and 2. Okay. So I've got 2 of those in there. These edges now are locked because we clicked on that edge right there, right here first. Those are collinear with that edge, which means they're locked. They're not going to go anywhere. Next thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and we need to make sure that both of these are equal in height. So we can do that one of 2 ways. We can either make this edge and this edge collinear, or we can make this edge and this edge equal. Either one of those works. They both are identical things to be honest. But I'm going to go ahead and use collinear. I like that a little bit more, generally speaking. I'm not sure why. But again, the equals tool, there's nothing wrong with it. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this line here. Hold Control, click on this one down here. Make those collinear, and now those are going to travel together. Okay, so now let's go ahead and put our dimensions in. I'm going to hit my S key and hit my dimension key, or tool. So our first dimension is going to be from this bottom face here up to the first face of our first cutout. That's going to be 2 inches. Our next one is going to be this distance here. So that is also going to be 2 inches. Third is going to be the height from here to here. So let's just grab this edge here. And that's going to be 1 inch. Next, we're going to use the distance between this edge here and this edge here. That's going to be the distance between our notches. That's going to be 1.5. And then lastly, we're going to put in a relationship between this line here and this line here. So I'm going to hold Control, click on that one. Holding Control, click on that one, and we're going to make those equal. And that's going to fully define our parts. You can see all of our lines on both of those sketches are now black. Okay, so we can go ahead and exit this sketch. And you can see now what I was talking about with those being just in the middle of space there. They're not impacting this side, so we're not going to have any issue there. So now, when we go in here, and I'm going to go ahead and hit my S key, do my extrude cut, and we're going to say through all. That's going to take this down through the entire part. Hit my green check mark. And now I've got those cuts going down through the remainder of my part. Alright, so that's it for those couple of little features. Go ahead and go to the next video for more.